Book, The Kitchen of Her Lies. Chapter 1. Salt in the Wound. The aroma of fried garlic and rosemary hung in the kitchen, a promise of coziness that remained unfulfilled. Jessie stood at the stove, deftly sliding spaghetti into the boiling salted water. Her movements were honed to automaticity, a beautiful ritual I once loved to watch. Now, I saw in them only part of the set dressing, part of the perfect picture she so diligently constructed. "Dad, look, a dinosaur." 7-year-old Sophie poked her finger at the tablet screen, distracting me from my observations. I turned and smiled, strained, but a child wouldn't notice. "A stegosaurus, sweetheart. It has plates on its back." "Stegosaurus," she carefully enunciated and plunged back into the prehistoric world. My world had also begun to feel prehistoric, frozen, fossilized, and Jessie was the paleontologist, carefully excavating the bones of our marriage, afraid of damaging the fragile outer layer. She turned around, and her smile was as flawless a product of this kitchen as the bolognese sauce simmering on the low flame. A wide, open gaze, lips slightly touched with gloss. I remembered a time when that smile made my heart stop. Now it only evoked a quiet, aching anxiety, like the echo of a distant earthquake. "Mark, can you get the wine? That one, the Tuscan," she said, and her voice was like honey in which flies drowned. I nodded and reached for the bottle on the rack. "That one." It was from our trip to Italy 2 years ago, the last real trip. Before everything slowly, almost imperceptibly began to crumble, before Leo appeared in her life. Leo, her new art director, young, ambitious, with a gaze that, I felt, lingered on Jessie longer than necessary. I'd seen his photos on her Instagram, from corporate parties, from gallery openings that had become part of her job. She spoke of him with professional enthusiasm. "Leo's a genius. He completely turned our last campaign around. Leo thinks I should speak up more at presentations." At first, I was happy for her. Her career in the ad agency was on the rise, and having her boss's support was important. But then the shades changed. Her phone, once left lying around anywhere, was now always face down. Her messages, which she used to read out loud to me with laughs, became brief and impersonal. "Running late. Meeting." And then there were those meetings on Saturdays, the need to swing by the office late on Sunday evenings. I poured wine into 2 glasses, ruby red, thick, like blood. "The spaghetti is almost ready," Jessie announced, draining the water through a colander. The steam enveloped her face for a moment, making it blurry, unfamiliar. We sat down at the table, Sophie, happy with her plate of pasta and cartoons in her headphones. Jessie and I, across from each other, like 2 diplomats at a negotiation. "How was your day?" she asked, politely breaking off a piece of bread. "The usual. Wrote code, put out fires with bugs. Thought about you and why you came back last Wednesday at 10 p.m., smelling not of office coffee but of some expensive tobacco you don't smoke." That's what I wanted to say. "Nothing special," I said instead. "And you? What was Leo up to?" The name slipped from my lips on its own, disguised as innocent interest. She didn't blink. Not a single extra muscle twitched in her face. "Oh, we spent the whole day laying out a new project for the client. Crazy deadlines, of course. He's just an unbearable workaholic." "Him. Not we. Not had to. He's unbearable." As if she was distancing herself from his demands, yet speaking of his work obsession with a slight breathy admiration. It was a subtle compliment, disguised as a complaint. "Will this project take much longer?" I continued, tasting the wine. It was bitter. "Another couple of weeks, probably. I'll probably have to stay late a couple of times. You don't mind if on Thursday I—" "Of course not." I interrupted her and my smile became wooden. "I'll pick up Sophie from school." The gratitude in her eyes was so sincere that for a moment I felt like a scoundrel for my suspicions. Maybe I'm imagining it all. Maybe it's my own insecurity, my boring life as a programmer projecting onto her bright, eventful world. But then I remembered. I remembered last Saturday. She said she was going grocery shopping. She was gone for 2 hours. I called. She didn't pick up. Then she sent a message. The store is a nightmare, line to the horizon, forgot my phone in my bag, didn't hear it. When she returned, her cheeks were flushed, not from the cold, it was +5 outside, but as if from brisk walking or excitement. And the smell. A faint, barely perceptible scent of perfume that wasn't hers. Something woody, masculine, like the smell on clothes in boutiques, where a mixture of hundreds of aromas hangs in the air. I didn't say anything then, just as I hadn't spoken about many other things. This is delicious, as always. I pointed my fork at the pasta. Thank you, darling. We ate in silence. The only sound was the voice of the narrator from Sophie's tablet, talking about triceratops. Giant reptiles with horns seemed less dangerous than the silence that had settled between us. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a normal notification. But I saw Jessie's glance dart towards my pocket for a split second, then just as quickly return to her plate. Something flashed in her eyes. Wariness? No, it seemed. Just seemed. Or not. After dinner, Jessie put Sophie to bed, and I stayed to wash the dishes. Warm water, foam, mechanical movements. My brain, fine-tuned to find algorithms and errors in code, couldn't stop. It was looking for bugs in our marriage, and it was finding them. She came out to the kitchen just as I was wiping the table. Want some tea? She offered. No thanks. I think I'll sit at the computer for a bit, finish something up. She nodded, and I saw a slight disappointment in her eyes. Or was it relief? Damn, I could no longer distinguish these shades. I had become colorblind in the world of her emotions. I went to the study but didn't turn on the computer. I sat in a chair in the dark and looked out the window at the city lights. He was out there somewhere. Leo. And maybe he was thinking about my wife right now. And her. Was she thinking about him while washing dishes with my sauce? While reading a bedtime story to our daughter? I took my phone. Unconsciously, driven by an impulse stronger than reason, I opened her social media page. She was online. The little green dot under her avatar glowed like a beacon signal fire, but not one pointing the way home, rather one warning of danger. I scrolled through her photos, mostly Sophie, her and me landscapes, but here was a recent photo from a corporate party. She was in a beautiful black dress, laughing, her head thrown back. Next to her, him, Leo. They weren't touching each other, there was a good half-meter distance between them. But they were looking at the same spot off camera, and their smiles were too identical, too harmonious. As if they were bound by some shared, unspoken joke. I zoomed in on the photo, her hand holding a glass, his hand, shoved in a pocket. And in the background, in the reflection of a mirror on the wall, I saw what I hadn't noticed the first time. His gaze was directed not at the lens but at her. Intense, appraising, admiring. And she saw it, I was sure. She caught that gaze and bloomed under it like a flower in the sun. I logged out of the account. My hands were shaking. My mouth tasted of bile. It proved nothing concrete. No confessions, no passionate kisses. Just a gaze, just an innocent photograph. But for my fevered mind, it was like a scream in the silence. I went back to the kitchen for a glass of water. She was sitting at the table with a cup of tea, hunched over her phone. Her fingers were flying across the screen. A slight, barely noticeable smile was frozen on her face. The smile that hadn't been there during dinner, the one that wasn't addressed to me. Hearing my steps, she flinched and quickly turned off the screen, flipping the phone over. "Still awake?" she asked, and her voice sounded a pitch higher than usual. "Wanted some water?" "Ah," she took a sip of tea. "I'll be up soon." I poured the water. My hand was still shaking. I felt like a thief in my own home, a spy in enemy territory. And she, my wife, the woman I had lived with for 10 years, had a child with, had become that enemy. Or had I become my own enemy, poisoning everything with my suspicions? I turned to her. Jess. Yes, darling? She raised her eyes to me. Big, clear. The eyes I once drowned in. And I wanted to blurt it out, lay it all out, ask directly. Are you cheating on me with Leo? Who is this person you're texting? Why are you lying to me about meetings? But the words stuck in my throat. I was afraid of the answer. Afraid she would say yes and our world would collapse, but I was even more afraid that she would look at me with sincere bewilderment and say no. And then I would understand that something was wrong with me, that I was the one who was broken. And then I would have to admit that I had destroyed everything myself, with my fantasies, my paranoia. Nothing, I exhaled. Good night. Good night, Mark. I left the kitchen, and she remained sitting there, at the center of her perfect, meticulously planned world. At the center of the kitchen that smelled of garlic and rosemary, and where an invisible yet palpable wall of half-truths, unasked questions, and quiet, treacherous lies lay between us. I went upstairs to the sleeping Sophie and kissed her forehead. She was the only real, indisputable fact in my life. Everything else, Jessie, our marriage, her love, had turned into a variable whose value I had yet to calculate. And I was afraid that the answer would not be a 1, symbolizing, yes, she loves, but a 0, emptiness, deceit. The chapter ends, but the silence in the kitchen where Jessie remained was more eloquent than any words. It was full of the echoes of unasked questions and the whisper of someone else's messages arriving on the screen of her overturned phone. And I, climbing the stairs, understood that from that minute on, my life had split into before and after. After this night, I could no longer simply believe. I needed proof, and I was ready to find it, even if it burned to the ground that very coziness, that very smell of a home-cooked dinner which had once been synonymous with the word happiness.